There's a neat, possibly apocryphal story about Henry Ford that has passed down across the years. The specifics change depending on who's telling it, but the basics are this. Henry Ford once balked at paying $10,000 to General Electric for work done troubleshooting a generator and asked for an itemised bill. The engineer who performed the work, Charles Steinmetz, sent this: making chalk mark on generator, $1. Knowing where to make mark, $9,999. Ford paid the bill. This story is cited by someone called Scott H. Young in a blog post he wrote in 2019. Scott H. Young is a self-described author, programmer and entrepreneur who I'd never heard of, but is the writer of books such as Get Better at Anything and the Wall Street Journal bestseller Ultra Learning. He's also been featured on TEDx, the BBC and the New York Times. So while this brand of aggressive be your best self shtick isn't really my thing, Scott is, apparently, a noted voice within this space. So let's take what he says at its apparent face value as something that a wide audience have taken notice of. The blog post is titled How to Be Prolific, and Scott tells this story about Henry Ford for this reason. Quote, "It reveals an important lesson if you want to produce more work without sacrificing quality. Knowledge is a fixed cost. If you want to increase your output without increasing costs, work on investing in the fixed costs to making stuff." End quote. What are the fixed costs to making stuff? Well, according to Scott, these are threefold. One, you create a vocabulary for your work. That is, engage with your field. You're a writer? Read. You're a musician? Listen. You're a programmer? Play. Two, master the atomic skills of producing stuff. And that is, get good at the basics so that it doesn't take so long to do. If you're a writer, internalize the components of a memorable headline and snappy paragraph. If you're, let's say, a developer making a platform game, or a lot of platform games, get your jump mechanic down and use it again and again and again. Thirdly, and finally, make failure cost less. The idea here is, quote, the higher the quality threshold you set for yourself before you'll make something, the less stuff you'll make, end quote. Scott's example is that he was writing 5 blog posts a week, up to 15,000 words, and as a result, readers weren't able to keep up. He reduced his output to 2 posts a week, but with no noticeable improvement in quality, just less work. And so, in the true spirit of hustle culture, he simply started writing more again, and posting more again. With this, we are sailing in the dangerous seas of the internet cottage industry of productivity, where, if you're not careful, your good intentions can lead you in a couple of short clicks from some honest best practices to thinking seriously about adopting Mark Wahlberg's 2:30 a.m. wake up and 4 a.m. workout routine. Take a step back from that precipice. You don't need a cryo chamber or to play golf at 7 a.m. And take a more reasonable look at this. What I'm trying to take from Scott's post is not the air of the wafty online self-help seminar, but the insight into the mechanics of productivity, the effort to make the idea of the prolific artist more intellectually accessible. It's not romantic, but none of that industry is. And neither is the story behind the creation of a lot of great art. A lot of the story behind the creation of a lot of great art can be summarised as, they made time, they worked hard. Angels didn't descend to Da Vinci, Beethoven or Bob Dylan and bestow them with their gifts. They worked on their thing. 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. But I don't think that's as unromantic as it sounds on paper. That 1% is the beautiful, intangible magic, the invisible alchemy that I'll never understand. This can apply to games. There are prolific developers out there in the indie scene who are making good, interesting stuff with some frequency, quality and quantity. There's Carl Thompson, Nama Takahashi and M. Leese, all developers who take elements of one piece of work into the next, taking one thing and morphing it into what comes after. But today, we're looking at someone else. Someone whose work you don't see in showcases, presentations or directs. Someone who, in the week this episode releases, is publishing their second game of 2025 and their 11th game in 8 years. Hi, I'm Andrew. Welcome to Dialogue Tree. This is episode 20, the good kind of production line, the games of Thomas K. Young. Now, I should acknowledge something significant at this point. I have no idea if Thomas K. Young actually exists. I've wanted to write an episode on Thomas and their games for a while. I really wanted to interview them on their approach to game design, how they soundtrack their games, have them tell their story. A showcase for an under-the-radar independent games developer. In my head, a discussion with this reclusive, prolific artist would be interesting, engaging, and insightful. So, I've reached out to Thomas in a few ways over the last few months, but I've had no response from either them or their PR. Now that's fine, they've got no reason to speak to me. They don't need whatever exposure this show would afford. Their Discord has more members than this podcast has subscribers, and I've got no right to expect anything in return. But there are no interviews with them online. And while there is a social media presence, it's all pretty impersonal, surface level stuff. It all adds up to a question. Is Thomas K. Young real? I have the suspicion that I'm being passively catfished. That in the future, this episode, the one you're listening to now, will amount to a case study in gullibility when it turns out that Thomas K. Young was a pseudonym for Skynet all along. If that is the case, I hold my hands up. But Thomas, if you are real, if you are out there, this one's for you. Let's jump on in. Thomas K. Young is a New Zealand-based games developer who released their first game, Faust, in 2017. They have followed this up at a regular clip, releasing a new game almost every year since. Biographically, that's it. From that point, we only have the games to go on. Maybe that's the way it should be. Now, there are unifying elements across all of these games. The visuals in all of Thomas's work are broadly similar. Simple, colourful, low poly. There are lots of reused, retooled or repurposed assets. You'll see the same balloons you can bounce off, the same key blocks to unlock, the same rotating platforms across all of them. The music in all of Thomas's games is broadly similar. A kind of bouncy, poppy, modern chiptune. Very video gamey, without the abrasive edges of the lower bit eras. There's usually only a few songs per game, and it's all self-composed. The sound design in all of Thomas's games is broadly similar. Each world has its own theme, and that plays continuously, interrupted by neither success nor failure. And the gameplay? Well, the feel of each game is basically the same. One character jumps like another, who jumps like the next. But each game introduces a single new conceit, a single hook, that makes each one feel distinct. Each game iterates across a bunch of levels of steadily escalating difficulty, while still amounting to a bright and breezy playthrough. This is the economics of productivity that Scott Young wrote about. Thomas K. Young has created a vocabulary for their work. They have mastered the atomic skills of producing stuff. They have made failure cost less. They have reduced the cost of the input to maximise the value of the output. Now, there are a lot of games to cover here, and I want to focus on a few in particular, so let's blow through these formative origin story ones. Thomas starts with Faust. This is a momentum-based platformer with only two inputs, left and right. You have to constantly hop in either direction to get to the goal. Super Faust and Super Faust 2 follow. The game is simple and addictive, the feeling of trying to control this constant locomotion, constantly keeping you on edge. It's fun, it's pick up and replay stuff. And then there's Volcano, a kid-friendly puzzle game where you make words from a Scrabble-like pool of letters in order to build bridges to help a mole navigate safe passage through the inside of a volcano. But it's the game that Thomas follows this up with that is the one that sticks. that takes the template set by the games that came before and crystallises it for the ones that follow. It's the game that generates multiple sequels, inspires the creation of a passionate Discord and speedrunning community, and of course, a makeshift plush. And that game is Daddish. In Daddish, you are Daddish, who is a radish. At the start of each game, the plot contrives to have him lose his 40 plus children. They might run after a stray balloon, follow a nefarious, sentient advertising hoarding, or get lost on a school trip. Then, it's up to you to round them all up. You do this one level at a time, a stray radish kid waiting for you at the end of each. You reach them and have a short, irreverent piece of dialogue with them. Sometimes self-referential, sometimes annoying, but mostly pretty funny. My favourite part comes after. You do a little hop together, and then you take off and fly, Superman style, off the top of the screen together. It's exactly as silly as it sounds, and exactly as silly as it should be. Now, how do you get to that point? And why do you want to? Because the gameplay is so tight. You move, jump, and double jump to navigate each space, avoiding a variety of enemies and environmental hazards, and making use of various traversal tools such as springs, moving platforms, grappling points. Platforming game stuff, and gameplay-wise at least, refined to a totally frictionless point. There are no complex inputs by design, as this allows Thomas to throw everything into the world design, which pretty much introduces something new in each level. One might be themed around platforms rotating around spike pits, one might be based around bouncing off balloons to move through it, one might be based around manoeuvring crates onto switches to open gates to allow progress. There are space levels where you play with low gravity, there are underwater levels, with sections where you navigate narrow passageways in a bubble. There are levels where you have a mount, a sentient snack patty called the Burgurgler, whose constant forward motion reshapes your approach to the levels, as you need to adapt to a new jump and new timing. There are chase levels, where this ridiculous, screen-filling monster bursts through the scenery and pursues you all the way to the exit. So there's variety. None of it is mold-breaking, but all of it is fun. In fact, I'm going to stretch out onto the tiniest of limbs and say, Daddish and its sequels are the most charming and addictive platformers that you've never played. Daddish 1 is good. Daddish 2 is also good, but a bit too streamlined. Too little friction. Daddish 3 is the best of this run, featuring as it does the widest and most confident variety of ideas, and the best balance of challenge. It also introduces Momato, a giant benevolent tomato who is the matriarch of the Daddish family. Once you've gotten over that mental hurdle, her levels are great fun. The game turns into an auto-jumper that feels like a very kind of Mario mechanic. Daddish 3 hones the template of its predecessors to a sort of platonic ideal of non-hardcore 2D platformer. And then, there's Daddish 3D, which is more of the same, with an added dimension. And notably, and I really want to stress this because it matters in the context of this kind of game, none of the awkward camera positioning or landing point judgment that usually accompanies 3D platforming. I can't tell you how Thomas does this. It just feels so precise, like the game is on your side. Even when it gets challenging and split-second timing is required, it just feels like the game wants you to be happy. Challenge and split-second timing. The fundamentals of platformers that last. If that's your thing, if that's what you want from this kind of game, there's something else for you here. And that is Daily Daddish. This is my favourite Daddish game. It's a game made up of 366 levels, one for each day of the year, each level only available for that day. The aim is to beat the level in the fastest time possible. There's bronze, silver and gold awards, and the all-important star award, granted only to those who complete a given level under the tightest of threshold timings. There's global leaderboards, and wrangling my way up these is something I've never gravitated towards in games. But I do here. That's probably because the same qualities of the previous Dadish games apply: the simple, tight controls, the simple, tight level design, the quick restart, the just one more try, but now more narrowly focused. It's you versus the clock for just a few minutes a day. The loop of going once, going twice, going for broke, in an attempt to discern every conceivable way of optimising your route through the level, is incredibly addictive. A double jump here, a single jump there, stop here, accelerate there. Every slight advantage you can fashion for yourself can be the difference between silver or gold or the star. And I love this kind of thing. It's demanding of your skills without being too demanding of your time. You can play it every day without it being an all-consuming Persona or Baldur's Gate. You can play it every day whilst playing something else every day. You can main this game if you want, or have it as a side quest. Occasionally, you can see the seams. Not all levels are created equal. Some are memorable, some are not. An inevitable side effect of the form that Daily Dadish assumes. It is, naturally, repetitive. I still love it. It's an excellent example of the, and this is intended entirely positively, casual game. Something you can drop in and out of, that still offers something substantial, something satisfying in the moment, and in the next moment, and into the future. If you're skeptical, I get it. Dadish is the most straightforward of platformers, in an indie gaming scene where platformers have progressed to a mechanically advanced next level. To that point, Thomas follows the Dadish series with something different. A game called Be Brave Barb. Released March 12th, 2025, I don't think I can express the charms of Be Brave Barb better than the press release does. So, check this out. Quote, Be Brave Barb follows the journey of Barb, an anxious but determined cactus who has lost her cherished book of positive affirmations. Without her daily boost of confidence, she must navigate a surreal world filled with quirky characters, tough challenges, and her own self-doubt. Featuring 100 levels, 5 formidable bosses, and 1 dodgy therapist, Barb's adventure is packed with charm, humour, and plenty of self-discovery. End quote. Barb is a cute little cactus, whose hat is an upturned plant pot, with a good attitude but a raw deal. You've got to help her navigate these hazard-filled, low-poly dreamscapes, but in a way you're probably not used to. An isometric, gravity-based auto-walker. Now, I think the mechanics of Barb bear a little explaining, so just roll with me here. Each level in Barb starts the same. Barb is planted upside down in the ground. Press A to make her jump out with a satisfying pop, and off you go. She walks forward at a steady pace, and all you have to do is jump to traverse obstacles or avoid hazards. The twist here is the very pronounced, zoomed-in isometric perspective, and that focus on gravity. You can picture each stage as a floating block in the sky, each one a self-contained little maze. A basic example. Let's say that Barb is on the outside of a square block. Barb would simply walk around this square in a perpetual loop. You are, however, subject to gravity. If you were to reach the corner of one plane and jump, you don't snap to the ground or bend around the outside of this square. You simply spiral off into the beautiful pastel-coloured ether. Now let's say that square is hollow and you are inside it. Now you would walk along the inside of one of these planes, and when you reach the perpendicular wall, bump into it, turn around, and go back in the opposite direction. To progress, you need to jump onto the perpendicular wall. To move around all of the inside of this square, you'd need to jump to each of the perpendicular walls in turn. Does that make sense? Cool. You're ready to go. And so, Be Brave Barb goes, walking steadily through close to 100 increasingly complex dioramic puzzle boxes, new obstacles, static enemies, jumping enemies, cannons, spikes on sticks that jump when you jump, introduced at a regular rate. Choosing when to jump is the challenge in this game. When switching from one plane to another, you can be careful, you can wait, Or you can go early, jumping out of the gravitational pull of one plane and into the next, and if you get it right, skip an oncoming hazard entirely. Or jump straight into a spike pit. There are warp points where you have to consider the direction in which you enter, as that affects the direction in which you exit, which affects your onward route through the level. There are springs that you have to determine when best to use, as they might help you, or very much not. As the game progresses, it plays with gravity even further, as you have to navigate multiple structures by jumping between them, paying attention to your angle of approach each time. I like the instances where you have to throw yourself off one block into space, out of its gravity, and plummet blindly through the sky in order to reach another platform. Each level is a puzzle to solve in a way that Dadish is not. While you can optimise the quickest route, that's less of the focus. Just the how of getting through is the focus here. Despite the occasional difficulty spike, the game feels relaxed. Adding to this is the slower, passive movement. It's all indicative of the fact that, despite that occasional difficulty spike, Barb is intended as that rare thing. A meditative, vibes-based platformer. The soft pastel hue that coats the game, the most pleasant in all of Thomas's games, the chill wave adjacent music, as if the game was scored by early Toro y Moi or Neon Indian, it gives this game a distinctive warmth. That warmth extends to the hidden objects in this game. The affirmations, little slips of paper hidden in each level behind a secret route. Collect them and finish the level, and you get to read them. Now these always made me laugh, where the occasionally self-consciously wacky exchanges at the end of each Dadish level didn't. There are roadblocks in this game. The isometric perspective can make it artificially difficult. Routine jumps rendered harder than they should be simply by the fact that it's harder to judge your position. The slow walk speed is a feature, not a bug, but frustrating when you've just botched a jump at the end of a level and are forced to go again from the start, and you have no way of making Barb move quicker. The bosses are pretty uninspiring. And still, I think this is the game that demonstrates the range and skill of this developer. The whole setup is a bit weird, a bit wonky, but very memorable. The gravity-centric focus is reminiscent of Mario Galaxy, but I've still not played a game, and especially not such a small-scale one as this, that feels quite like this. And finally, to give credit to something I highlighted earlier, the music. My favourite in any of Thomas's games. Now, we've been listening to Thomas's music throughout this show, but this is the theme to World 3, Boo Boo Berg. And so, that brings us to September 9th, 2025, the release date of Thomas K. Young's latest game, Dunkadillo. In this game, you play an armadillo who curls into the form of a basketball and, as a result, bounces perpetually across the world. You can see how this plays out. Several worlds broken into bite-sized levels, new obstacles introduced steadily, the complexity increasing more steadily still, a hidden object in each stage, unlockable skins that reference previous games, the same balloons, platforms, key blocks, and all-around visual and oral language. I've played the first 3 worlds, and it scratches the same itch as always. An instantly gratifying dopamine hit. Not an escape from quote-unquote more serious games, but a complement to them. A little burst of tactile fun to drop in and out of. Thomas K. Young bounces on, perpetually, along their own singular path. There is a school of thought that says less is more. That works for some artists. Terrence Malick has put out 10 films in 52 years. Kate Bush, 10 albums in 46 years. Naughty Dog, 2 games in 10. If you're a fan of gaming podcasts, you're probably well aware that Robert Ashley just put out only the 9th episode of A Life Well Wasted in 16 years. Is any of this work improved if the people responsible increase their output? Probably not. That's not their style. In some corners, reverence is given to this approach. The narrative of the reclusive, tortured artist an easy out for writers looking to imbue their piece on the first album by Artist X in 100 years with some rote drama. Productive artists are usually granted a less sympathetic read. Their productivity often cast as a problem, or, at least, given less credit. I can think of a few examples off the top of my head that counter this. Guided by Voices, Prince, Frankie Cosmos, Hirotaka Shiratsubaki, Paranol, some band called the Beatles, and some dude named Pablo Picasso. But in the gaming world, positive productivity is harder to discern. The impression left by certain publishers flooding the storefronts with erroneously titled new editions or 20 versions of AAA Clock is that to be prolific is to be the enemy. The most productive larger studios, Ubisoft, EA, have seen their reputations dragged by virtue of their propensity for frequent releases. But in the indie space, it's different. The economics are different. If an indie developer releases a good game that takes anywhere from 1 to 10 hours to play through, at an affordable price point, and then does that again, and again, and again, it seems that both player and producer benefit. What's that line? I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less. Well, that's not a dream. That's actually happening. Thomas K. Young is evidence that the approach works. They want to make rewarding, satisfying, fun games. They want that to be their career. So they're doing it in a way that allows this. Quickly, sustainably, productively. If Thomas is in fact an AI, then I'm sorry, I guess. But if you're interested, play their games. They're affordable, they're short, they're fun. And I think you'll enjoy them. If enough of you do, maybe that'll bring Thomas into the limelight, if that's even what they want. If enough of you do, and maybe, just maybe, they'll talk to me. Thanks for listening. You can find a link to the show notes in the episode description. The artwork for Dialogue Tree was produced by Pixel Benny, and you can find the show online at dialoguetree.cc. Talk to you next time.